Coming up on the Tacoma podcast.
Seattle, frankly, has been hit by COVID harder than some places, certainly harder than Tacoma. Rents have continued to kind of tick up in Tacoma. So it's really good residential market, great industrial market. I think office is coming.
Tacoma, what's good? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Derek Shockman. On the Tacoma podcast, we have dope conversations with the people of the city of Destiny. We have episodes with small biz owners, athletes, creators, performers, politicians, and neighbors. If you're down with Tacoma, tune in and let's get inspired. Let's go. All right, Al, let's get it popping. Would you rather invest in commercial real estate or residential real estate?
I think for me, long term, the goal is definitely commercial real estate. It seems like a way to, one, it's what I know best, but it seems like a way to kind of build up passive income. I think in the short term, residential is probably more realistic. I think in terms of the time and money, I probably have a little bit more time now than I do money. Not that I have a lot of either. So I think a little more, bite-sized residential investments where I can be more hands-on, whether it's, renovating to sell or renovating to rent. Is probably what's going to come first. But long term, definitely the goal is to get into commercial real estate investing.
Cool, man. Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. I think that residential is a little bit easier to start just because it's one, cheaper. But I would be lying to you if I said I didn't want like a small mixed use building, maybe 3 or 4 commercial retail spots on the bottom with 3 or 4 apartments above. So that's pretty dope.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think right now, to that point, residential, not that anything's safe in our current world, but I think residential, you don't see any vacant apartment buildings. You do see vacant office buildings. Right?
Yeah,
so it is a little bit safer right now. But no, I think long-term commercial is the goal. And there are ways to do syndication to get into it where you don't have to have millions of dollars. I know that. So that's kind of the goal, maybe 5 years out.
Yeah, that's dope. So Alex Muir is with me, guys. Alex, you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so Alex Muir, born in California, moved up to Washington when I was a kid. Went to high school down in the Tacoma area, Curtis. Went to UW after that. So I've been, kind of Seattle, Tacoma for the last almost 30 years of my life. Initially graduated college, thought I wanted to go into law school, become a lawyer. Quickly realized that wasn't the case, and so I pivoted into real estate and kind of stumbled into commercial real estate, which is what I'm in now and have been in for almost a decade, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, living in Seattle, doing investment sales up here.
Cool. So you started about a decade ago, you said, in commercial real estate. Was your first role a broker, or did you start doing something else?
No, I started doing something else. Growing up, I didn't even, think of commercial real estate as an industry. I just didn't know anybody that worked in it. When I thought of real estate, it was houses essentially. So, my first job after college, obviously we graduated in a recession essentially. So, you kind of took whatever job you could get in 07, 08. But my first job was just kind of, legal assistant, office manager for a law firm. And it was a law firm that specialized in real estate. So I kind of started there thinking I wanted to be a lawyer. Kind of, through my few years working there, decided that wasn't the case, but I was actually interested in some of the real estate cases they were working on. And that's when I got, more exposed to commercial real estate. Then stumbled into a JLL role, which actually the first job was a marketing assistant. And so it was really just something to get my foot in the door. I knew I had somewhat of an interest, but I certainly wasn't qualified to jump right into brokerage or, have kind of the nest egg to feel comfortable doing that. So no, marketing was the first role. I did that for a few months. And then pretty soon after that, a research analyst role in our Seattle office opened up. And I jumped on that and then kind of spent the next kind of 5 or 6 years climbing the ladder in research, ultimately managed a team of analysts for Seattle and Bellevue. Kind of stumbled into it. Research was really the way that I learned about the market and about, brokerage. And in hindsight, it was kind of a perfect thing. For 5 or 6 years, I was kind of getting paid to study the market and report on it. So it forced you to become a market expert and get exposed to a lot of different brokerage types.
For sure. Was there anything in particular that made you say, okay, I've got all this experience now I want to transition and commit to being an actual broker?
Not necessarily. It's kind of a weird timing thing for me personally. I knew, I had some personal changes with a relationship, and it's just kind of a time where, there's not necessarily anything holding me here. It's so kind of took a step back and figured out or kind of thought on, am I passionate about commercial real estate? If so, do I want to stick within research? What is kind of the growth? If I do stick within research at JLL, do I want to do something totally different in Seattle? Do I want to move? I kind of took a big step back and just kind of looked at everything and realized that, I still love Seattle, still felt like I had a lot that I wanted to accomplish in commercial real estate. But, it was a time where I could take on some more risk and jump into brokerage. And again, spending those kind of 5 years in research, I got to work with all of the different teams. So I was working with, leasing agents that did on both sides, landlord rep and tenant rep for office, industrial, and retail. I was working with property management folks, brokers that did public institutions work. So they would work with, UW, City of Seattle, Washington, municipalities like that. Got a little bit of everything and learned kind of what I liked and didn't like with some of, what went into some of those roles. And then it was kind of just a perfect timing thing where as I'm thinking and mulling over all these things, an opening with a VP role with our capital markets team popped up. So it was kind of like you thinking on these things. I figured if I was going to go into brokerage, investment sales was kind of what I was most interested in. And then it was a perfect spot with a team that had, brokers that had been doing this for 20 plus years that I had a ton of respect for, that I knew I'd be able to learn under. But it definitely took some thinking because I still love research and there's still, growth opportunities, especially on a national level at JLL there. Ultimately kind of who helped me make the decision was actually a mentor who I had, who was one of the national leaders in research at JLL. I kind of talked to him about it and he actually kind of not pushed me out of research, but gave me kind of the helpful words that I needed. He's basically like, we write all these reports, we track all these comps. We're always telling people about what's happening with these deals, but it would probably be kind of cool to see how they actually get done. He's like, worst case scenario, you spend a year there, you hate it. He's like, you can always come back to research and you will have, that knowledge of that you'll be able to, even be a better researcher if that's, what you ultimately come back to in the future. So no, it was kind of just perfect position opened up. It was good timing for me on kind of a personal level. The team had a ton of respect for, they thought I could bring some value with my research background. And then there's obviously a financial motivation as well, right? It's salary is nice, right? But at some point it's like, I see the upside of being a broker, especially in our market that's, just been thriving for the last decade, really. So just kind of made the jump.
For sure, for sure. Now, you mentioned like salary and versus commission. Is being a commercial broker, is it 100% commission, or do you have a base salary, or how does that look?
Different teams, different offices do it differently. For me, that again, why that role was kind of perfect. My first one was it was kind of a hybrid. So you were with this team that had kind of managing director level brokers, and also had a couple associates, a couple financial analysts. And so it was kind of a quarterbacking role where you are doing business development, you're bringing in deals, you're leading business tours, you're making calls when you're marketing assets. So you're doing that brokerage work, underneath the managing brokers, but you're also kind of managing the rest of the team. So our marketing support, our analysts, and I had just spent, a few years managing research analysts. So it's kind of a similar skill set there. And because of that, you do kind of have a small salary, but you also get some of the upside from the team's deals. Because at that point, for the first kind of 6 to 12 months, you're not necessarily generating a lot of the new revenue. So that was a bit of a hybrid. Ultimately, what I'm in now is full commission. Just as I'm assuming you are. I think one of the differences is some firms have a draw. Where they'll give new brokers kind of a small monthly amount that gets paid back once you start doing deals. So there's a few different ways to structure it. But for me, it started out being kind of a hybrid, and then obviously is now transitioned to full commission.
Got it. So yeah. do you see people jumping right into being a commercial broker, or do they kind of do what you did, like starting, moving your way up through a company?
A bit of both. I think the thing about commercials, we talk about it as this one thing, but there's within commercial real estate, there's so many different types of brokers. I think for investment sales, for capital markets, it would be pretty rare to just go to being, an independent broker. Not that it doesn't happen, but I don't see it very often. That would be a pretty big jump, fresh out of, college, grad school, whatever the case, into that. But we do see sometimes in like tenant rep, especially some of the 10-year brokers, you're typically, and I think that's one of the differences, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but one of the differences between commercial and residential is that, very few deals, if any, get done without kind of a team being involved. And obviously you also collaborate with folks, but I mean, even for, I don't think I've seen really any deals in the investment sales world get done without, several hands being involved. So I think brokers, young brokers straight out of college could be leasing brokers for sure, but typically even there, you're going to get paired up with, more established group, and you'll be a runner, they call it for a time being. So you can, and I guess it probably does happen, but I don't see it much. It's just, yeah, I mean, when you're working with institutions, you need somebody's resume in a lot of cases to rely on. I mean, even if you're doing a lot of the work on the background, it does help to have that established person as kind of the face of your team, at least to kind of help you build those relationships. It'd be really tough to just, fresh out of college, jump in and just kill it as a commercial broker.
For sure. Yeah, it's a lot different than residential, which is obviously what I do, right? And just from seeing like what you have done, I would not I feel like I would not be legit at commercial real estate. I think I'm great at residential, but I think commercial is just a totally different beast. Can you kind of describe some of those differences that you see and kind of like maybe what people like, what kind of traits are beneficial for a commercial broker?
Yeah, I think you're selling yourself short. I think you'd be just fine in commercial. I mean, I think the big thing, right, is you need to be driven. You need to be passionate about it. Right? You need to be personable. I mean, for any type of brokerage, right, you need to have some serious time management skills, and you need to hold yourself accountable because, again, I guess really kind of any independent contractor role, right, you can kind of do whatever you want, but
Yeah.
you need to hold yourself accountable to have any success at it. So I think some of these things, it's a relationship-based industry, just like residential is. I think the big difference is probably more with, just the clients you're dealing with, right? You might know the stats, but I don't know how many homes a typical person buys in their lifetime, but it's probably not many, right? We're dealing in most cases with institutions that are transacting, several times a year. So it's, they have acquisitions teams. It's just kind of a different level. I think mostly on kind of the analysis side. I think that's probably the difference, is that you need to at least have some, level of proficiency with financial modeling, I think, to be successful in commercial. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to be able to do your own kind of 10-year cash flows and do Argus and all these things. I think you can surround yourself with a good team who has, somebody that's really solid and has a background in that. But it's some base level of understanding the analytics, because again, when you're dealing with more income producing properties, it's the acquisitions teams are making decisions not necessarily because they love a property, right? Like we don't ever have those showings, or not often. I'm sure you have, where it's, you tour somebody through a building and, the husband or wife falls in love with it. And it's like, we have to have this house. Right? and kind of, logic in some cases, in terms of the numbers, might go out the window, right? It's a bidding war. We're going to do a pre-inspect. We're going to do all these things. And, where I think the groups we deal with for the most part are a bit more objective. Yep. It's not to say that they don't fall in love with deals. And that's, in some cases, if one group tours a building and they do love it, they might underwrite, rents for an office tenant that's $1 or $2 higher, right? And then that ends up allowing them to justify a higher price. So there is, there's still humans making the decisions. They're not machines. So it's not 100% objective, but it's much more analytic driven. And again, you're dealing in a lot of cases with investment committees that have dozens of folks making decisions. So it's things take a while to get done.
Totally.
I think the underlying traits, that allow somebody to be successful are probably pretty similar. I just think the skill sets are probably a bit different.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think, when I'm thinking about clients, right, from the residential side, we're dealing with emotions probably a lot more, and you're dealing with a lot more numbers. Not to say that people don't pay attention to the numbers. We definitely get analytical people on the residential side, but it's not nearly, they're not worried about the income from it. They're worried more about, like, the market appreciating and Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, people are still funny. I mean, you still get the things where groups are competitive, right? And they want to win a deal. And then you get some groups that when they win a deal, they immediately think they overpay. So they have the buyer's remorse. You still get the funny, things that we all do when we're making big transactions. But yeah, it's just a little bit different.
Totally, totally. So like a residential deal will take about 30 days, for example, from start to finish. Once you get in a contract, what's it look like on the commercial side? How long does it take for a deal to close?
God, that sounds nice. So our team mostly does office sales, but we also do a lot of land development sites, specifically in the last 2 to 3 years, where there's been so much development activity
Yep.
in the region. For we'll do office first. For a typical office deal, if it's a stabilized, it's rented, it's 90+% occupied. If it's a pretty clean deal, it's not uncommon in Seattle to have a 30-day due diligence and then a 15 to 30-day close. That happens for sure. I think what's probably the average again for kind of a stabilized downtown deal is going to be like a 30 to 45-day DD and a 30 to 45-day close. So maybe 2 to 3 months from when you go kind of under contract to close. There's a lot longer kind of ramp up period in the marketing process. Again, kind of envious of residential where you get a new listing, you bring it out, you do open house, you do a ton of showings, and then again, because of how great the market's been, maybe it's under contract in a week, right? That's not really ever going to happen with commercial, at least not quite that fast, even with how competitive the market is. But once you pitch something, once you bring it to market, tour for a month or two, you can go through a couple rounds of offers, start the due diligence process. It's probably realistically from when you close, you probably got the assignment 6 months prior at least.
Yep.
And then land is a whole different thing. Again, if the development site's strong enough and has enough competition, and it's relatively clean in terms of the zoning and the municipality you have to work with to get permits. Maybe you'll get a 90-day DD in a 30 to 45-day close, but a lot of times the developer that you get under contract is going to want to wait to close until they have their permits and entitlements. So it could be 18 months to close. So land deals take a lot longer. You might get a land listing and get really excited and it's exciting, and then it's 2 years from when you start marketing it to when it closes. That's not uncommon.
For sure. And what's funny though is like not on the listing side, because like you mentioned, I mean, you pretty much put a house on the market, say on a Thursday, Friday, it's off the market Monday or Tuesday in this current market. But on the buy side though, where there's just not enough inventory, it's taken a lot longer for buyers to find homes. So, some of those deals, not once you get into contract, but like, it is taking 6 months to a year to find people their houses, which is just insane, it seems like. But yeah, it's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's tough on the buy side. We do a little bit of buyer rep work. It's probably a third of our time, which is a little bit unconventional. When we were back at JLL and some of the larger firms, they'll do 90% of their work, and their compensation obviously is from listings. We're actually spending quite a bit more time on some select buyer rep assignments, but it's a gift and a curse, right? It does force you to get really knowledgeable about certain areas that they're interested in and build those relationships with those owners, but it's also a lot of valuing properties, throwing in offers to get shot down. So it's kind of a similar thing on commercial. If you're representing buyers, again, now we have some groups that are holding out and think that they're going to be getting discounts, post COVID, and all these things are going to change, and maybe that's going to come, right? There are going to obviously be some distressed opportunities, but so far things are holding pretty steady, and groups that don't have to sell on the commercial side are content to just kind of wait until things are vaccine kicks in and things are back to normal.
For sure. Now I've known you a lot of years, right? But I did creep on your bio page on your website, and I noticed when you were at JLL, you started co-led the P&W Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you started that?
Yeah, so it's diversity and inclusion stuff has always been kind of important to me. I think even going back to college, that was a big way that I was able to go to University of Washington, right? Growing up, I didn't have a ton of money. It was a single parent household. But I actually was lucky enough to get a diversity scholarship to UW. And so I think, even going back to that, there's always been, something in the back of my mind that whatever I ultimately end up doing, like, I feel like I kind of, I should pay it back, right? Pay it forward, I guess.
Yeah.
And hopefully provide some opportunities for other folks. That's, one of my biggest kind of long-term goals. So on kind of the small level I was able to do it at JLL, I wanted to do that. And so, we founded a local chapter for AABN at JLL, which is the African American Business Network. Also helps our local chapters for, Pride and some other groups there. But yeah, it's kind of a tough thing. Commercial real estate, like lots of industries, has a really big issue with diversity or lack thereof. And it's tough, and I get it, right? We're in Seattle, which is not a particularly diverse city. It's diversifying, but it's not a particularly diverse city, and we're in an industry that's not particularly diverse, and it's tough. And so, and I think I kind of saw that more so once, I got to the research manager job where I was actually hiring analysts and kind of building a team, and going through the process of even looking for, summer interns. And you kind of see why things are the way they are. I mean, one, I guess part of it is like selfishly JLL. I'm in an office of, 100 people between kind of Seattle and Bellevue, and I look around and nobody looks like me. For a while, I was literally the only Black person there.
Yeah.
Which is just odd. And so it's like, it'd be nice to kind of, get a few a few faces in here that look kind of like mine, especially, in some leadership roles preferably, but at least, ground level so we can work up towards those. So once I was in a position to kind of hire, I could kind of see how things end up the way they are. And it's not because there's people with bad intentions necessarily. It's just, if you start at the bottom, right? You start summer interns, the kind of first flood of applicants that we would get, in a lot of cases, good applicants are, sons, daughters, cousins, family, friends of brokers we have. So it's kind of a cycle, right? It just kind of stays in. And I can even look back at myself, right? I didn't know anything about commercial real estate growing up. Had I kind of love all aspects of it. Had I probably would have focused on it sooner.
Yep.
And so it's just hoping to provide some opportunities for other folks. And so, in the research team, we built a really diverse group there. Again, it's a small scale. There were 6 of us, but, I kind of did what I could in terms of hiring. But you have to make kind of a conscious effort to work with other local organizations that are, that have kind of young STEM, that have STEM programs for high school graduates even, or for, kids in college. Have to work with UW. In some cases, one of the things that we benefit from is that, Seattle, Tacoma is such a great place to be that there are lots of folks that are willing to move here for a good job. So it's, also working on kind of a national and West Coast level, trying to work with, HBCUs or other institutions that might have folks that, we would appeal to. So it's really a conscious effort to try and kind of diversify the office. And that's, something that I was really passionate about. And so we kind of built that up at JLL. I think that's one of the things I'm more proud of working on while I was there.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thanks for sharing that, because just being in residential real estate in general, it's not that diverse. It just isn't. So let's kind of transition to the Tacoma commercial market here, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are curious, because we see it happening all the time. Tacoma's blowing up. And so what's going on with the Tacoma commercial real estate market? How's it looking?
It's looking pretty good. I think it's a stable, it's definitely a stable residential market. And obviously you live there. I think there's a lot of exciting things happening in terms of, residential and some of the mixed use properties and retail, dining and bars downtown. It's exciting. It feels like there's a there in Tacoma for sure that wasn't the case, 5 years ago. Yep. So I think Tacoma is definitely coming on the office side. It's kind of a stable market, right? It's not necessarily the sexiest. Your employment anchors are, JBLM, Multicare, Franciscan, Boeing, and the Port, really. Which, again, those are very stable, employment sectors or employers. But it's not quite as dynamic yet as Seattle, Bellevue, Kirkland, some of the markets that are coming. I think we see a ton of exciting news. Obviously, it's if you look at Port of Tacoma, kind of Lakewood, even up to the Kent Valley, those are some of the, most sought after industrial markets in the country, frankly. And a lot of that is e-commerce growth. But again, this stuff in Pierce County as a whole, it's blowing up. I think Tacoma, again, is really stable. If you look at residential vacancy in Tacoma, it's like sub 5%. I don't even think it's ticked up at all in the last year, which, Seattle, frankly, has been hit by COVID harder than some places, certainly harder than Tacoma. Rents have continued to kind of tick up. in Tacoma. So it's really good residential market, great industrial market. I think office is coming.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of the office space, from what I've heard, is it needs some updating for like tech companies, right? So, do you know anything about that or like what that looks like?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's again some of the things it has going for it, you know, are it has this young, you know, pretty diverse and well educated employment base. Obviously, you have UW Tacoma, TCC, UPS. It's a fast growing city. It has a lot of things going for it, in terms of talent for prospective tenants to pull from. It just kind of needs that one or two big anchor tenants to shake things up. Um, in terms of the office space, yeah, there certainly is some space that needs to be updated, but that's I think a little bit of a chicken or egg thing, right? I don't know that it's a little bit scary, understandably, for some landlords to spend, you know, $50+ a square foot in capital improving their buildings if they don't necessarily feel the tenant demand's there today. So I get that. It's, you can build a shiny new tower today and have it sit for a few years. That's a pretty scary thought, or renovate an existing building and have it sit. That's a bit scary. I think there's also a few pretty big blocks of space now that probably need to be leased up before that happens. But again, I think it takes one or two big tenants to move into the market to kind of change everything and build a cluster. And we're seeing it happen. Infoblox has an office in Tacoma. They're growing. Amazon's rumored to be looking for up to 100,000 square feet, which again, I mean, that could change things quickly, right? It's just historically Tacoma's been a little bit of a sleepy office market. You had State Farm, right? And then State Farm left, and that was kind of the one big office tenant downtown. Prior to that, you had Russell. Russell left, and then things were her for a couple of years. So I think we need those one, two, three, kind of big tech tenants to change things pretty quickly. But I think it's coming. And again, I'm not going to say that Tacoma's going to be Lake Union as much as I love Tacoma, but I mean, if you drove through South Lake Union, like even when we were in college, but certainly 20 years ago, it was nothing. I mean, it was like dilapidated warehouses. Now it's, Amazon's headquarters, and it's one of the top tech and life sciences markets in the country, if not the world. So things can change pretty quickly. But yeah, it's just not quite there yet. We just need a couple big anchor tenants.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny. That's a pretty hot topic with the Comans, just because, I'm on the side of like, I definitely want bigger companies to be here. But I don't want it to be overwhelming
Yeah.
as well. Like obviously, selfishly, house prices will go up, so that's going to obviously benefit me, but that's not going to benefit everybody as a whole. So,
Yeah.
our friend Brandon, it's funny because he texted us, right, or not texted us, he emailed us about like, I think Tesla was one of them, or rumored to have like a spot coming in Lakewood, right, like a manufacturing thing. I don't know exactly. And then who was the other company? Amazon actually closed on a deal, I think it was. But yeah, I think when I'll get excited when Amazon or a big Microsoft or somebody decides to get about a 500 to 1,000 person office in Tacoma. I think that's when I'll be like, oh shit, here it comes.
Yep. No, that changes quickly. And there's been lots of studies on how, those kind of jobs, ultimately add, 3 to 4 jobs per job in kind of service industries that support it, right? Then you're going to get more restaurants and all the things around one of their campuses. So I think that's going to transform downtown, take it to the next level really quickly. And that's when you will probably see some new office development there. But no, I mean, your point about growth is definitely true. And it's kind of funny, even when I was, doing research, 7 or 8 years ago, JLL, one of the topics, as Seattle was growing as rapidly as it was, how do we kind of become San Francisco in terms of their strength, in tech, but without having San Francisco's problems, right? Where nobody, can really afford to live there. And now it's kind of funny that Tacoma, obviously it's not quite there yet, but forecasting out, it's like, how does Tacoma grow to be, kind of the next Seattle, or maybe the Oakland to Seattle, San Francisco, but without having Seattle's problems. And it's like, I think Seattle's grown a little smarter, a little better than San Francisco, but certainly there's been, lots of hiccups, and the affordability is a big issue here also.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's like the biggest issue that people are worried about. They don't want to become Seattle, which we can't. We're not big enough, but at the same time, I don't think people want any of those problems, even though, like you said, Seattle has done a better job than San Francisco. Have you heard of any, like, is there any newsworthy closings of recent? I know we mentioned the, warehouse space in Lakewood. Amazon picking that up. Is there any others that you've heard of?
A couple interesting ones that I'm watching. So the News Tribune building is,
Oh
I've
yeah.
heard it's under contract.
Okay.
I'm not sure who that is and what exactly, and that's just kind of it's a massive building. It's a 250,000 or so square foot building, and it's kind of in an odd location. I mean, it was very specialized, right? It made a ton of sense for the Tribune, but what does that ultimately end up being? Does it stay kind of this quasi office manufacturing building? Does it become retail? Is it redeveloped into residential? It's kind of a funky location, but it's a huge site. I think it's about a 17 or $18 million deal. At least that's what the listing was. And it's been on the market for close to 2 years, I think. But yeah, last I heard that might be under contract. So I guess excited to see what comes of that if it does close. So that's one. I think the other one in terms of downtown, the Heritage Bank building on 12th and Pacific is on the market, which is really cool. I think it's probably close to 100 years old. An office tower there, and it's $8.5 million is the listing price, which is under $100 a square foot, which is just kind of staggering to me. It makes sense, but if you compare it to some of the recent sales we've seen in Seattle, I mean, downtown Seattle, you can't really buy an office building for, really under probably $700 a square foot, for the most case today. I mean, I guess there are some, buildings that need significant capital improvement, or they have, high vacancy. They're maybe in the $500 to $600 a square foot, but certainly nothing below that. And we recently had a $1,200 a square foot deal. So the fact that you could buy, a pretty cool office building in Tacoma for $100 a square foot,
Yeah,
or a little under, is pretty interesting to me.
for sure.
But again, that's one of those buildings. I think it's 40 or 50% leased. So that's one of those that needs to get leased up, and one of those blocks of space that needs to get filled before some of the development comes.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I think I have this building right. The Washington building, downtown Tacoma. Didn't you have a client?
The Washington building actually is it's right by the Heritage building, and we actually we do quite a bit of work up here with the owner of that building, and they're actually converting that to residential. So that's another one that's really interesting. They bought it. It's an office building. They bought it probably 3 or 4 years ago, with the intention of long-term kind of, renovating it and converting it to residential. But initially they put some money into it to renovate and keep it as office for a few years and just kind of re-tenanted it. But yeah, now they're going to start that conversion. So I think it's going to be apartments, not condos, but that's going to be a cool one too.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's apartments. Actually, when I was down there last week, there was fences around it, so they're starting it for sure.
Yeah, which is exciting, and I think that's real quick. That's one of the other things that that's an opportunity zone project, which is another way that downtown Tacoma, the benefit of kind of owning and potentially renovating in Tacoma.
You sent me a couple projects along the Foss waterway too, and it's just interesting because there's going to be a lot more people living downtown Tacoma pretty soon here, probably within the next 2 to 5 years, which is going to be very interesting as more people are down there, the restaurants, and bigger tenants coming in. So it's good to see.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. I want to get in. I want to get in on some investments in Tacoma before it's too late.
Yeah, right. I know. It's like, it would have been nice if we were this age like 10 years ago, but
No.
so, there's no surprise to these mixed use buildings popping up. And I know Proctor has 2 new ones. There's one right now that's by the post office that people are petitioning. Just, I think they don't like the way it looks. But anyways, and I know that, I don't know what the building's called, but it's on Proctor. It's East and West is in there, UPS store. I know that's for sale. So what makes developers so interested in Tacoma, basically?
Well, I think it has a few things going for it from the development perspective. One, we mentioned kind of the stable employers, right? So you do have kind of a floor there in terms of kind of vacancy. You're going to expect that the JBL and Multicare, Francisco, and Boeing, and again, some of the other groups there, some of the insurance firms there, and some of the tech groups that are moving in are going to need space, right? Are going to continue growing there. Because again, it's one of the fast growing cities in the state. I think there's good infrastructure in place, as far as transit, the Dome Station, obviously you have Link Light Rail. I think it's not talked about as much, obviously, as some of the East Link extension stuff up in kind of Bellevue, Redmond, or even the Northgate, Linwood light rail stuff up north, but there is that Hilltop Link extension, which is going to even improve transit more, right, and connect kind of downtown to TCC. So I think it has relatively good transit. Again, this is all relative, right? Our region is behind some other most other major cities, frankly, in the country in terms of transit. But I think Tacoma is, actually one of the brighter spots there. It's a business friendly environment, certainly developer friendly. From what I've heard, they would love to have groups that are looking to build the next tower in downtown. I think they've kind of sought that out for years, right, in terms of the Office, of Economic Development there. And the main thing for a developer, right, is the cost of land is cheap, right? It's cheap compared to Seattle. You can get land there for well under $100 a square foot. You can't get anything in downtown Seattle for really under $700, kind of comparable to what we talked about for the Office. So you're talking about, 10 to 20% of the cost of, land in downtown Seattle. I think on the other hand, right, is that while the land's a lot cheaper, that's only one component of the cost to develop, right? The labor and the materials aren't necessarily cheaper. So, the land's a fraction of the cost, but lumber, steel, concrete, whatever other materials we need aren't necessarily cheaper, right? We're only 40 miles away. You're going to be pulling from the same kind of architectural and construction talent pools, Seattle and Bellevue. So you're not necessarily going to save money on that front. So the land's a lot cheaper, right? But the other components are basically the same, as what it would cost to develop anywhere else in the region. Again, relatively affordable, business friendly. You have some good employment anchors. Again, you got a fast growing population. I think there's some of the kind of less quantitative things, right? Then you have an awesome waterfront. Again, we talked about downtown's rapidly transforming. It's a beautiful city. So I think there are some of those intangible things that are going to make it appealing. It's just, a question of if the demand's going to be there.
For sure. Let's wrap this thing up, man, unless you have anything else to add, but I have one more random question for you.
Yep.
Do you think Tacoma has the potential to be a tech hub?
I think it absolutely does. I think it's, not a question of, if, it's just a when thing. Again, you have the talent base, which ultimately is all the tech firms care about, right? The real estate is obviously a component of it, but I mean, they've migrated, the Bay Area tech firms, essentially all of them have a presence in Seattle, if it's at least kind of a satellite office, if not a full grown, several 100,000 square foot office. And obviously they did that partially because, the real estate's half the cost up here as it is in the Bay Area. But why they really did it is because of the tech talent, right? And so that's what it's going to take. And I think a lot of that obviously is in place in Tacoma. Some of it is up here, but could certainly commute to Tacoma. The Seattle to Tacoma commute is not bad. Vice versa is not awesome, but you can certainly live if you wanted to in Bellevue or Seattle and commute to Tacoma relatively easy. So I think that the talent's here. It's just a matter of kind of if it comes, and it's a little scary, understandably, to be kind of the first developer to go out on a ledge or spend the money to get an office building to kind of that Class A quality where they would where a tech tenant would jump on it. I think there's I don't know if you know about Southport. That's a big development in Renton, and they kind of took the gamble that Renton was going to be a big tech hub, and it very well might at some point. But in the meantime, they delivered 700,000 square feet, these 3 beautiful towers of office space on Lake Washington that have sat vacant now for 2 to 3 years. So it's coming. I think it's going to come to Renton also at some point, but it's coming. It's just kind of when. I think it's exciting though that we know about these tenants that are looking for space. Again, Seattle's one of the top 5 tech markets in the country. Tacoma's 30 or 40 miles away from it. It's and it's much more affordable to live there. It only makes sense that it's coming.
Cool, man. Cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on, and I'm looking at the clock. It's 4:55. Me and Alex are doing this little accountability. I don't know what accountability thing regarding fasting this month. So I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, shit, I better get this last meal in so I can
you got
have
to run.
an early break tomorrow.
I was going to say, I think I got another hour to eat today, so I got to run.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, thank you. And if anybody wants to hit you up about commercial real estate, is there a good place for them to do that?
Yeah, you can email me. It's Muir, Muir, at lee-associates.com. Yeah, that's me.
Cool.
Or hit up Shock or Bug Shock.
Yep, that's fine. Hit me up. All right, man.
All right, thanks.
Yep, peace. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining and taking the time to listen to the Tacoma podcast. If you were down with this episode, I'd be super pumped if you subscribe. Also, if inclined, please drop a review and share the pod with a friend. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again. Peace.